consumer and the producer are the central characters in economics. In this video, we will look at how economic models see the consumer. This is Chris, the consumer. There are probably many interesting things about Chris, but for our basic economic models, only two things matter. Chris wants to buy certain products, and Chris has a certain budget to buy those products. So, Chris's goal is to spend the budget in the best possible way. But what is the best possible way? Well, Chris ends up with a bunch of products once all of the budget is spent. In economics, we call that bunch of products a consumption basket. It contains some food, some clothing, some entertainment, some transportation, and probably other things as well. Spending the budget in the best possible way means that the consumption basket that Chris ends up with is better, according to Chris, than any other possible consumption basket. Indeed, if we could use the budget to buy a different consumption basket that Chris would like better, then clearly the original consumption basket would not be the best. We are implicitly assuming, of course, that Chris has a clear opinion as to whether one or another consumption basket is better. We call that opinion Chris's preference, and we assume that Chris always has a clear preference between any two consumption baskets. When shown any two consumption baskets, Chris can express a preference for one over the other. It might also happen that Chris feels indifferent between two particular consumption baskets. In any case, Chris has preferences over consumption baskets, and those preferences clearly tell us how Chris feels about any two particular consumption baskets. Either one is preferred or the other, or they are indifferent. Whether Chris buys a product or not depends on both Chris's budget and on prices. Indeed, Chris might decide to buy more of a product if its price goes down. More interestingly, Chris could decide to buy more of a product when some other product's price goes up. For example, if the price of apples goes up, Chris might decide to buy more of some other fruit. Or if the price of gasoline goes up, Chris might decide to buy more bus tickets. The specific quantity that Chris chooses to buy of a particular product given certain prices and income is called the quantity demanded of that product. We would generally expect that Chris's quantity demanded of a product goes up if that product's price decreases while income and other prices stay the same. But it is theoretically possible that the quantity demanded of a good goes down when its price decreases. Such a good would be called a giffen good. For example, suppose Chris is very poor and survives on $20 a week, all of which must be spent on mac and cheese to get enough calories. Now, suppose that the price of mac and cheese drops by a half. Chris can now get the same amount of mac and cheese as before, but for only $10. In principle, Chris could now buy more mac and cheese. However, it is much more likely that Chris would prefer a more wholesome and diverse diet now that basic calories can be covered by $10, and would spend the freed up budget on other foods. In fact, it is likely that Chris would buy less mac and cheese and replace some of those calories with better food. So, in this case, mac and cheese would be a giffen good for Chris. The quantity demanded of a good is also likely to change with income. If Chris's income goes up, we would generally expect the quantity demanded of each product to increase. More money, more consumption. And this is true for most products. A higher income would lead to a higher quantity demanded by most consumers. Such products are called normal goods. But for some products, a higher income could lead to a lower quantity demanded. Such products are called inferior goods. In fact, the reason that mac and cheese was a giffen good for Chris in the previous example is that mac and cheese was very much an inferior good for Chris. To see this, notice that the radical fall in the price of mac and cheese effectively made Chris richer. Because Chris's consumption basket was all mac and cheese, the halving of mac and cheese price effectively doubled Chris's buying power. Being richer in this way, Chris ended up buying less of mac and cheese, an inferior good. Note, however, that not all inferior goods are giffen goods, although all giffen goods are inferior goods.